Linda Sobek was born on July 9, 1968, in Los Angeles, California. Growing up in a close-knit family, she was described by those who knew her as a cheerful, fun-loving, and motivated young woman. From an early age, Linda demonstrated a passion for performing and a strong interest in fashion and modeling. She attended South Torrance High School, where she was involved in cheerleading, and after graduating, she pursued a career as a model. With her beauty, striking blonde hair, and athletic build, Linda found success in the highly competitive world of modeling. She worked steadily, appearing in print ads, commercials, and magazines. One of her proudest achievements was being a Los Angeles Raiders cheerleader, which gave her national exposure and opportunities to pursue more modeling work. By her late 20s, Linda was on the verge of further success in her career. She had built a solid portfolio and was getting more lucrative gigs. As an active, vivacious woman, she was known for her love of fitness, dancing, and the beach. To those around her, it seemed like Linda had a bright future ahead of her. Charles Rathbun, the photographer. Charles Rathbun was a 38-year-old photographer with a reputation for working in the automotive industry. He had a history of photographing cars for various magazines, often capturing action shots of vehicles in motion. While not a household name, Rathbun had established himself professionally and had access to models like Linda, who worked on car-related assignments. Despite his credentials as a photographer, Rathbun had a troubling side. He had a history of being aggressive and manipulative, especially around women. Friends and colleagues would later describe him as someone who could be controlling, with a dark side that emerged behind closed doors. However, nothing in his past pointed to the depths of violence he would soon unleash. The day of the murder. On the morning of November 16, 1995, Linda Sobek had an appointment for a photoshoot. Charles Rathbun had arranged the session, allegedly for an auto magazine feature. The photo shoot was to take place in a remote area of the Angeles National Forest, a sprawling natural area northeast of Los Angeles. Rathbun claimed that he needed to photograph a Lexus SUV in action, and Linda would serve as the model for the shoot. Linda, being a professional, was no stranger to remote locations for shoots, but she made sure to tell her mother about the assignment. She left her home in Hermosa Beach, excited for what seemed like another routine modeling job. However, as the hours passed, Linda failed to return home. Her family grew worried when they couldn't reach her, especially after learning that she hadn't shown up to any other appointments. Linda Sobek goes missing. By the evening of November 16th, Linda's mother reported her missing to the authorities. Family and friends immediately began a frantic search. They plastered missing person flyers all over the city, and local news stations quickly picked up the story. The media, drawn by Linda's career as a model and former cheerleader, made her disappearance a high-profile case, adding pressure on law enforcement to act swiftly. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Linda had been with Charles Rathbun on the day of her disappearance. He had booked the photo shoot, and his name came up repeatedly when authorities began tracing her last movements. Police quickly brought Rathbun in for questioning. Rathbun's involvement and confession. When first questioned by police, Charles Rathbun was cooperative but evasive. He claimed that the photo shoot had gone as planned and that Linda had left on her own after they finished. He expressed concern for her well-being, but his story had holes, and investigators found his behavior suspicious. As the investigation intensified, police searched Rathbun's car, the Lexus SUV that he had used during the photo shoot. Inside the vehicle, they found evidence that would soon implicate him in Linda's death. Traces of blood were discovered in the vehicle's interior. This was a crucial piece of evidence that contradicted Rathbun's story. With mounting evidence against him, Rathbun eventually broke down under the pressure of interrogation. He confessed that Linda Sobek had died during the photo shoot, but he insisted that her death was accidental. Rathbun claimed that while demonstrating a high-speed maneuver with a Lexus SUV, he had accidentally hit Linda, killing her instantly. However, this explanation did little to quell suspicions, especially given his next admission. He had panicked and disposed of her body. The search for Linda Sobek's body. Rathbun led authorities to a remote location in the Angeles National Forest where he had buried Linda's body in a shallow grave. On November 27, 1995, after an extensive search, her remains were recovered. The discovery devastated Linda's family and friends, who had been holding out hope for her safe return. An autopsy was conducted, revealing a darker truth than Rathbun had initially admitted. Linda Sobek had not died from an accidental collision. The forensic report showed that she had been strangled and there were signs of sexual assault. This evidence directly contradicted Rathbun's story of an accidental death. A chilling revelation. As investigators delved deeper into Rathbun's background, they discovered troubling details about his character. He had a history of inappropriate and aggressive behavior, particularly toward women. It became clear that the murder was likely premeditated, and the evidence pointed to a disturbing theory. Rathbun had lured Linda Sobek to the remote location under the guise of a photoshoot with the intent to assault and kill her. Rathbun had no history of violent crimes, making the case even more shocking. His behavior fit the profile of someone who used his professional status and charm to gain the trust of women, only to betray that trust in the worst way possible. The trial of Charles Rathbun for the murder of Linda Sobek was one of the most highly publicized trials in Los Angeles in the 1990s. Given Sobek's status as a model, former Los Angeles Raiders cheerleader, and the intense media coverage of her disappearance and death, public interest was immense. The trial, which began in mid-1996, was closely followed by both local and national news outlets, turning it into a spectacle that left many shocked by the disturbing details that would emerge. Prosecution's case. The prosecution built a strong case against Rathbun, painting a chilling picture of a man who had planned the murder of Linda Sobek under the guise of a professional photoshoot. According to the prosecution, Rathbun had meticulously plotted to lure Linda to the remote Angeles National Forest on the pretense of an automotive photography session. The state argued that his true intent was to sexually assault and murder her. Key evidence that supported the prosecution's claims included the forensic examination of Sobek's body, which showed signs of sexual assault and strangulation, contradicting Rathbun's initial claims of an accidental death. Prosecutors highlighted the presence of bloodstains found in Rathbun's Lexus SUV and argued that these were consistent with the brutal nature of the crime, further establishing that Sobek's death was not an accident as Rathbun had suggested. The prosecution also introduced details of Rathbun's character and behavior, exposing him as someone who had a disturbing history of inappropriate and controlling conduct, especially toward women. Multiple women came forward during the trial, offering testimony that painted Rathbun as someone who had crossed professional boundaries in the past, using his status as a photographer to manipulate and intimidate his subjects. While Rathbun had no previous convictions for violent crimes, these stories helped prosecutors establish a pattern of predatory behavior. Additionally, the prosecution argued that Rathbun's actions after Sobek's death, such as burying her body in a shallow grave and attempting to cover up the crime, showed a clear consciousness of guilt. If her death had truly been an accident, they contended, Rathbun would not have gone to such lengths to hide her body. Rathbun's defense. Rathbun's defense team, on the other hand, tried to convince the jury that Sobek's death had been a tragic accident. They claimed that while Rathbun was demonstrating a high-speed car maneuver during the photoshoot, he had unintentionally hit and killed Sobek with the vehicle. According to the defense, Rathbun had panicked after the accident and had made a series of poor decisions, including burying Sobek's body out of fear and confusion. The defense acknowledged that Rathbun's behavior after the incident, specifically hiding Sobek's body and lying to the police, was both wrong and illegal, but they argued that this was the action of a man in a state of shock and fear, not a premeditated killer. They pushed the narrative that Rathbun had not gone to the photoshoot with the intent to harm Sobek, and that what had happened was a terrible accident exacerbated by a poor reaction to the situation. Despite these claims, the defense struggled to explain the forensic evidence that pointed to sexual assault and strangulation, both of which suggested a more intentional and violent act. The defense attempted to discredit some of the forensic testimony, but it was an uphill battle against the overwhelming physical evidence presented by the prosecution. The testimonies. The emotional testimonies during the trial from both Linda Sobek's family and her friends further swayed the jury. Sobek's mother, devastated by her loss, took the stand and tearfully described the shock and horror of learning about her daughter's death. Friends testified to Linda's kindness, professionalism, and her excitement about her modeling career. These testimonies made it clear that Linda had trusted Rathbun and that her death had been an unimaginable betrayal. The case also attracted the testimony of other women who had worked with Rathbun in the past. Several testified that they, too, had been placed in uncomfortable situations during photoshoots with him. These testimonies, while not directly related to the crime, added to the narrative of Rathbun being someone who exploited his professional position to take advantage of women, leading the jury to see a pattern of behavior that aligned with the prosecution's theory. The verdict. After several weeks of testimony and compelling closing arguments, the jury deliberated on the charges. They were tasked with determining whether Linda Sobek's death had been a premeditated murder or an accident, as Rathbun claimed. On September 13, 1996, the jury found Charles Rathbun guilty of first-degree murder. The decision reflected the jury's belief that Sobek's death was the result of intentional violence, not an accident. The physical evidence of sexual assault, strangulation, and the calculated nature of Rathbun's cover-up made it clear that the murder was deliberate. Following his conviction, Rathbun was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The conviction was a relief for Sobek's family, who expressed gratitude that justice had been served, though it could never bring back their beloved Linda. Aftermath and impact. The murder of Linda Sobek had a profound impact on multiple levels: her family and friends, the modeling and entertainment industries, and the wider public. The case left a lasting legacy that shaped how people viewed safety and vulnerability within certain professions and led to increased discussions on the protection of models and actresses in potentially dangerous environments. Impact on the modeling and entertainment industry. Linda Sobek's tragic death sparked a wider conversation about the safety of models and actresses, particularly those working in the freelance or less regulated sectors of the entertainment industry. Sobek had been a well-established model, yet she fell victim to someone who used his professional reputation as a photographer to deceive and ultimately harm her. This raised significant concerns about how models and performers could protect themselves when working with individuals or companies they didn't know well. Following the murder, modeling agencies and actors' unions became more vocal about the need for stricter safety protocols in the industry. It became standard practice for models to vet photographers more thoroughly before agreeing to a photo shoot, and many agencies began insisting that models never work alone in remote locations or unfamiliar settings. Some agencies implemented guidelines requiring a chaperone or security presence on set for shoots in isolated areas. In addition, it became more common for models and actresses to ask for formal contracts and clear documentation of work assignments before accepting a gig. These measures aimed to reduce the risk of exploitation and ensure that professionals in the modeling industry had more control over the environments they worked in. The case also highlighted the darker side of freelance photography. It drew attention to how certain individuals could manipulate the trust inherent in professional relationships between photographers and models. As a result, photographers were subject to more scrutiny, and some agencies began conducting background checks on new photographers before allowing them to book models through their services. Media coverage and public reaction. The intense media coverage of Linda Sobek's murder turned her into a symbol of innocence lost. Her image as a former NFL cheerleader and model brought widespread public attention to the case. Sobek's beauty, fame, and tragic fate made her a household name during the investigation and trial. Tabloids and news channels covered every development in the case, often focusing on her life, her career, and the gruesome details of her death. While the media's intense focus on Linda's career and appearance sometimes bordered on sensationalism, it did raise important questions about the dangers of predatory behavior in industries where young women are particularly vulnerable. Sobek became an emblem of how trust can be betrayed in the most horrifying way, and her case was a cautionary tale for aspiring models and actresses. Linda Sobek's family. For Linda Sobek's family, her death was an incomprehensible loss. Her mother and father, devastated by the murder of their daughter, struggled to make sense of the tragedy. In interviews following the trial, Linda's mother spoke of her heartbreak and the tremendous void left by her daughter's death. The family was comforted somewhat by the fact that Rathbun was convicted and would spend his life behind bars, but their grief was ever present. In the years following Linda's death, her family worked to keep her memory alive. They established scholarships in her name and became involved in efforts to raise awareness about violence against women. They also became vocal advocates for ensuring that the modeling and entertainment industries implement better safeguards to prevent similar tragedies from occurring. Through these initiatives, they hoped to make a positive impact in Linda's name, ensuring that her death would not be in vain. Cultural legacy and the true crime community. The murder of Linda Sobek has continued to captivate the true crime community, with numerous books, television specials, and documentaries covering the case over the years. It remains a significant case in Los Angeles crime history due to the nature of the crime, the public profile of both the victim and the perpetrator, and the lessons it imparted about safety in the modeling industry. Linda's death is frequently cited as an example of how violence can intersect with professional settings where women are disproportionately vulnerable. Her story resonates deeply in true crime circles, not just because of the heinousness of the crime, but because it illustrates how easily predators can mask themselves in positions of power and trust. Linda Sobek's legacy is a reminder of how fragile life can be and how trust can sometimes be tragically misplaced. The changes that followed in the industry, along with the awareness her case raised about personal safety, ensure that while her life was cut short, her memory continues to have an enduring impact. Legacy. While Charles Rathbun remains in prison, serving his life sentence, the story of Linda Sobek lives on as a tragic reminder of the dangers that can lurk beneath seemingly harmless opportunities. Linda Sobek was more than just a model and cheerleader. She was a beloved daughter, sister, and friend whose life was tragically stolen by a man she trusted. Her memory continues to be honored by those who knew her, and her case has remained a prominent example in true crime discussions about how quickly trust can be betrayed and how a person's life can be cut short in the most horrific of circumstances.